Hey everybody, welcome back to the Last Boy Scouts. We're your hosts, Scotty the Professor Neas.
And I'm Reed the Beard Landtrip.
And today we're going to show you an awesome build. Reed is going to show us how to make a bucksaw, a tool that you can take out in the wilderness with you to help you as one of your 10 C's cutting arsenal.
So what we're going to do today is just with a few simple tools, we're going to build a bucksaw from some simple items you can find at your local hardware store. And again, it's something you can break down, put into your pack, and take with you out into the wilderness when you're doing your outdoor adventures and your bushcrafting. So Scotty, you ready for this?
Hell yeah, brother. Stick around.
It's going to be a good one. So, like I said, with a few basic tools, we're going to show you how to create and assemble a basic bucksaw that you can use when you're in the wilderness. So, we're going to give an example here. This is one I've previously built, and you can see we just have some basic 1.5 by 2s using paracord and a saw that you can pick up at your local hardware store. So we have some of our items laid out here. Here's our wood that we're going to use today. So let's go over some basic measurements we're going to use to create this. So on our upward portion here, we're going to want to measure 12 inches. Now I like to come over just one notch from the 12 because when we saw this, we're going to lose just a little bit of material. So there's one. And there's 2. And then using our speed square, we're going to mark those off so we know where to cut. Now these 2 portions are going to be our upper portion of our bucksaw, and then from there our middle support beam, we're going to measure 24 inches. Like I said, we're going to come up a notch because we're going to lose a little material when we cut. Now part of this too is that when we make this middle support beam, we are going to make some cuts in here, and that's what's going to fit it into the center of these. We're going to make some, we're going to drill out some holes here so that our support beam locks into it. So what we're going to do is we're going to move over to the saw and we're going to cut these. So we've made all our measurements, and now it's time to do our cuts. We've moved over to the arm saw. So if we're going to use a piece of power equipment like this, make sure that you're using safety items such as glasses or gloves if you need to. In this, I don't like to use gloves in case something gets caught on the board. I don't want it pulling my hand in the saw. Make sure all that your guards are in place also. We don't have invisible guards like some of the other people on our show. So we'll go ahead and make our cuts here. Now this particular saw, I do have a laser on it, so I can see exactly where I'm going to be cutting. That way I have a nice precise cut. So putting our safety glasses in place. Now again, this is going to be our middle section of our bucksaw. So now we're going to cut our arms for the side. Lining up our cut, make sure it's good. We're going to be cutting a portion of that off anyway, so although we didn't go all the way through, we're fine. And our last cut. And there we go. That's going to be our 3 pieces of wood that we're going to use for our bucksaw. So, I've drawn out here how I'm going to make the peg that's going to fit in our up and down stabilizers. You may ask though, how do I come up with the length that I measure? Well, I base that on the saw blade, the saw blades that I use. In my particular, this is just particularly what I use. I use the Fiscars. It's a 24-inch blade. So, our main cross member is 24 inches in length. But we're going to measure in 1.5 inches, and then what we're going to do is we're going to make certain cuts here in order to give us a peg. Now if you're curious what those numbers are, so we're doing 1.5 inches from the top. Here we're going 3/8 of an inch in, and then here we're doing 3/16 of an inch from the edge to this portion here, which will end up giving us this square here, which we're gonna drill out our stabilizing beams on the side, and that'll plug right in. So our blade, as you can see, is 24 inches. But once we make these cuts and slot everything in, we'll be able to line up these holes, drill through our vertical beams, and then we can put our bolts in. So some of you may be asking why I'm using a hacksaw on wood. Well, part of that is I'm taking my time, but a hacksaw has very fine teeth, and this is more of a fine cut. It may take you a little longer, but you have a more precise cut and cleaner cut. Less work you have to do afterwards. So now that we've finished up our support beam in the middle and we've got our ends cut here, now what we're going to do is on our vertical beams, what we're going to do is we're going to have to cut a hole here for these pegs to fit in, like a socket. So what we've done, we've measured down from top to bottom 4 inches, and then we've done 1.5 inches is what this distance is here. So we're going to find our center point, and that's where we're going to drill using our handheld cordless drill. We're going to drill, and then we'll have to refine that socket with a rasp or with a file. So what I'm doing is I'm drilling out the holes that I'm going to use. These are the sockets. Now for expediency, you can cut these out, carve them out, but I'm using the drill press here. Make a nice smooth hole for that peg to fit in. So we've come up with our main structure for our bucksaw. So at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to drill our holes here at the bottom. The bottom is where our blade is going to sit. At the top, we're going to string that with 550 cord and a toggle that we're going to use we're going to tighten and tension, which pulls everything together. So a little pro tip, when you're in the wilderness and you have to make one of these out there using a knife, we're not worried about pretty or everything fitting together perfectly right. Just make sure that you're fitting everything up so that it's functional and usable. So remember that here in the shop, we can we can be a little more precise, but out in the wilderness, you want to just put everything together and make sure that it's functional and that it works. So we're here in the final phases of doing this. What we're going to do, like I said, we're going to drill our holes up here. This is where our tension cordage is going to go, and at the bottom we will drill out. This is where our saw blade is going to go. So we're going to start here. Let's take our blade out here. Be mindful when taking this out. Obviously it is a saw blade. It is extremely sharp. So what we can do here is we can put our blade out. We can mark where we want to drill. And that's where we're going to drill our hole at. Removing our blade and back to the drill. So at this point we have everything mocked up. We're going to take our vertical stabilizers, and what we're going to have to do with these is we have to cut a slot here in the middle. This will be just deep enough for that blade to sit in. So we're going to utilize a saw to cut right down the middle of these. All right, so we've cut our slot in here on both of our verticals. So now what we're going to do, after we did just a little bit of cleanup work, we're going to go ahead and piece everything together. And then what we will do is we're going to put our blade in place to make sure our fit is good. Looks like everything's fitting up correctly. And then what we'll do is we'll drop in our hardware. have our tensioning toggle here in the middle. We've already started to run our 550 cord through. We drilled 2 holes in this because this is how we're connecting it and being able to turn this, creating tension, pulling everything together. So we'll go ahead and cut this. And burn our ends here just a little bit so that we don't have a sloppy mess on the end. And we'll continue. Bring that through. All right, we have enough. What we can do now is feed this through. We're going to have a slight amount of tension on this, but what we can do is let's square this up a little bit so that we're even on both sides. Fairly close there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie, if you remember from our knots video, I'm going to tie a fisherman's knot here in order to connect these two. We have a little bit of extra cordage here, so trim that off. Burn our end so we can seal that off. And now, with this tensioner, I'll start winding our 550 cord, and it will gain tension pretty quickly once we get going here. Now what we can also do too is we can refine this by using a sander or sandpaper, refine that. But as you can see, the tension is quite a bit here. Solid, it's not coming apart. And now you can utilize that to cut while you're out camping. This is the basic shape. We're going to refine it a little bit without you guys on camera, but we're going to sand it down a little bit around the corners so we have a little more refined looking piece. But this is just your basic bucksaw, breakdown bucksaw that you can utilize while you're out camping. You can fully break this down and fold it up, put it into say a canvas bag, and there's different carrying cases for these that you might be able to find places like Self-Reliance Outfitters or even on Amazon. So I would suggest canvas. It's probably the best and longest lasting material that you're going to be able to put this in. So there's our basic breakdown bucksaw, and we want to thank you guys for stopping by, and hey, you guys have a good day.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Don't forget to smash that like button, hit the subscribe, tackle that alert bell, and as always, stay safe, stay vigilant. Knowledge is your weapon. Be prepared.